Today, we're going to be talking about a god. Not the kind you pray to for rain or good luck, but the kind that reminds you of exactly how small you are. Now, most people see a guy in a rubber suit and kicking over a Lego set and think, oh yeah, cool monster. But if we look at the history of the 70-year franchise, it's not just about monsters, it's a mirror. It's a reflection of Japan's trauma, the effects of the Cold War, and eventually Hollywood's obsession with its spectacle. From the black and white nightmare of Toho in the 50s to the neon-soaked brawls of the Monsterverse today, this is the complete breakdown of the Godzilla eras. Behind me, I've got a timeline of the franchise. First, we have the Showa era from 1954 to 1975, the Heisei era from 84 to 1995, and then we've got the Millennium era from 1999 to 2004, and then we've got the Monsterverse era from 2014 to present. But we also have a branch off, which this is the Reiwa era, and this is from 2016 to the present as well. And this is kind of a breakdown of the main movies that you should watch based on this timeline that really tells the full story that has the most impact of the franchise and what it's actually trying to convey. So, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get into the Showa era from 1954 to 1975. This is from Nightmare to Hero. We have to start at the beginning, 1954. This isn't a fun movie. Ishiro Honda's original Gojira is a funeral. Japan was less than a decade out from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and then the Lucky Dragon number 5 incident happened. Godzilla wasn't a chapter, he was a walking scar. He was skin like keloid scars, a voice like a creaking door to hell, and he represented the atomic bomb period. But then, things got weird as we move into the 60s. The Showa era shifts. Japan is recovering economically, they want entertainment. Godzilla goes from being a natural disaster to a grumpy uncle who protects Japan from even worse things like King Ghidorah, which King Ghidorah is a three-headed monster, dragon-type space creature that comes down from space and has breath of lightning and is super mean. Think of like a realistic Hydra. So the key takeaway is this is the era where the Versus formula was born. It ends in 75 with Terror of Mechagodzilla, but by this point Godzilla is basically a superhero who knows martial arts and it's campy, it's fun, but it's just lost that 54 bite, if that makes sense. For the Showa era, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get into some of the movies that I would recommend watching to kind of get the idea of that era. First, we've got the 54 Godzilla, which is the original. Then we've got King Kong versus Godzilla. I put Goji here just to kind of like use that as a short abbreviation, but Goji, Godzilla, same thing. Goji, Destroy All Monsters, is also the final movie that I would recommend watching for the Showa era. Now, getting into the Heisei era, which is from 1984 to 1995, the Bioterror years. After a 10-year break, Toho decided to hit the reset button. They ignored everything except the 54 original, and this is the Heisei era. I enjoyed this era for a few reasons. First, the continuity is tight. It's one long story. And second, the themes shift to biotechnology, which we're talking about genetic engineering and the god complex of humans. Godzilla becomes a literal force of nature again. Massive, mean, and radioactive. It all accumulates in Godzilla vs. Destroya, where Godzilla's heart literally becomes a nuclear reactor in meltdown. He dies. It's super emotional. It's peak cinema. So some of the movies that I recommend watching that have to do with the Heisei era is The Return of Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Biollante, which Biollante is kind of it's Godzilla in his DNA fused with a plant, creating this like plant-like monster, Biollante. And then Godzilla vs. Destroya. And Destroya is another mutant monster, or in this case, kaiju. Those are kind of interchangeable terms here for this series. But, yeah. So, moving on, we're going to get into the Millennium era, which is from 1999 to 2004. This is like basically the multiverse before it was cool. So Hollywood tried to make a Godzilla movie in 1998. It's not good. It was basically a giant iguana, kind of think Jurassic Park meets, honestly, Rango. It's kind of a giant gecko, runs around, whatever. Toho was so offended that they came back immediately with the Millennium era. This era is like an anthology series. Almost every movie is a standalone sequel to 1954. You want a Godzilla that has a ghost possessed by the souls of World War II victims? We got that in Giant Monsters All Out Attack. You want a Matrix-style action movie with aliens? We've got that, Final Wars. It was experimental and kind of weird, but it was a little bit of a fever dream. Final Wars is a fantastic film. I loved it. It was great. Told a great story. Loved it a lot. So, some movies that I would recommend watching in this order from this era is Godzilla 2000, Giant Monsters and All Out Attack, which I referenced, and then Final Wars. So, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move into the Monsterverse, which is from 2014 to the present, this is kind of the American Titan Hollywood style Godzilla after the fallout from the first Godzilla that they tried to make, which also known as Zilla. Not great, really horrible. This is their bounce back from that. So, we cross the pond. Legendary Pictures takes a crack at this. This is the production company that decided to take over Godzilla. Which is a really interesting fact, by the way, that Toho kind of rents out their kaiju and their monsters to Legendary and other production studios as like you can use our monster, but they've got full copyright over all of their monsters and things like that. So they rent out each monster for a certain amount of money so that way Legendary can use it in their films, which is really interesting and cool that we're, I guess, renting these fake monsters that have just been created in this series because it's so popular that there's a price tag on how much you can have screen time for a literal CGI monster, which is fantastic. I love that. The Monsterverse is super fascinating because it treats these monsters as ancient sovereigns. They aren't just monsters, they are the original owners of Earth. Gareth Edwards gave us the scale, making Godzilla feel like a skyscraper that could crush you without even noticing. Then Mike Daughtry and Adam Wingard learned that the Titans mythology is a high-budget, high-spectacle, and gave us the Godzilla vs. Kong showdown we wanted since the 60s. It's less about the horror of the bomb and more about the nature of fighting back against us kind of thing, and you're getting to see a lot of really cool monster fights and battles of Godzilla vs. Kong and things like that. So, if we get into the Monsterverse timeline, the movies that I would recommend, which are by Legendary, is Godzilla 2014, King of Monsters, and then we've got Godzilla vs. Kong, which is like the new rendition of the old movie. But it's a whole completely different story. So don't get them confused. They're not the same. Completely different story. After that, we're going to go into the Reiwa era, which is 2016 to the present, which I would consider these are really good masterpieces. And I'm very excited because this includes Godzilla Minus One and Shin Godzilla. With Godzilla Minus One, the sequel is actually coming out, Godzilla Minus Zero, which I'm super excited, and I can do a separate video about what I think about Godzilla Minus Zero and who I think the monster is going to be in that one. I've definitely got some theories and some ideas, so we'll definitely make that in another video. But without further ado, let's get into the Reiwa era. America, is making blockbusters. Toho went back to the lab and created two of the best films in the entire franchise, Shin Godzilla and Godzilla Minus One. For Shin Godzilla, this is kind of a satirical look at the Japanese bureaucracy. Godzilla is involving eldritch horror. He doesn't just walk, he exists painfully. Then, in Godzilla Minus One, this swept the world. It went back to the post-World War II roots, but added a level of human trauma we've never seen. It proved that you don't need $100 million to win an Oscar. You just need a story that hurts. Godzilla isn't just another monster here. He's the physical manifestation of a soldier survivor's guilt. This movie is by far my favorite movie in the franchise. I love it. It's basically a man's trauma through World War II, and Godzilla happens to be there. But it is fantastic. They do a great job. Godzilla looks amazing. I love the design. It is genuinely one of the best films I've ever seen in my life. I cried. So I would 100% recommend. So if we go ahead and we look at the Reiwa series, this is what. So if we go ahead and look at the Reiwa era, these are the movies that fall under that. We have Shin Godzilla, Godzilla Minus One, and the anime trilogy that has Godzilla Singular Point, and I think a couple other ones that I can't remember their names right now. But Godzilla Minus Zero will also be included in this era because it's a sequel to Godzilla Minus One. Why does he endure? Why are we still watching this giant lizard 70 years later? because Godzilla is whatever we're afraid of at the time. In 54, it was the bomb. In the 70s, it was the pollution. In the 80s, it was science run amok. Today, it's the feeling the world is out of our control. He's the king of monsters, sure, but he's also a reminder that no matter how much we build, nature and our mistakes will always have the final say. But hey, that's just my take. Which era is your favorite? Are you a rubber suit purist or a CGI Titan fan? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for hanging out. Phantom Ray out.